What is up, you lovely listener? Welcome to another episode of Oversharing. Our host today is the host of the podcast Don't Keep Your Day Job, which has over 11 million downloads and features conversations with creative entrepreneurs like actresses Jenna Fisher, blogger Seth Godin, and a ton more. She's a phenomenal coach, and she's sparking a movement for every soul to add their gift to the world. But before I speak too much, let's allow Cathy Heller to overshare. How are you doing today, Cathy?
I love the name of your show. I think what you're doing is so important, especially now when people really have so much they want to get off their chest. You ask someone right now, like, how you doing? And like, if you don't interrupt them, they'll talk for like 9 minutes straight because there's just so much, but it's so important. And I'm happy to be here. So I'm doing good right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we got to chat a little bit before we started recording, and as I was saying, I mean, I love podcasts. I love the video calls because it's like we're getting coffee the first time. You have a coffee, I have a kombucha because I've already had like 3 coffees this morning. But I would love to know. Let's start from the beginning. What were you like in high school?
What was I like in high school? I was a less confident version of who I am now. So still really sensitive, pretty empathetic. I was the person that everybody would tell all their problems to. I feel like now my relationships are a little bit more equal, where I will actually go to people for support, and I've kind of found that balance. I was never like the popular girl. I was the one that like the popular girl would like call when she like needed help or needed someone who really got her. And then I like just would spend all my time, just trying to be extra nice, and always felt like I had to do so much just to make people like me. I loved musical theater. And so I used to do plays, but I never really won over the approval of my high school drama teacher. And it was weird because my sister, who was older than me, was the star of our high school. She was the lead in every show every year, and I never was, not even one line. So instead, I would do community theater, and I always felt like outside of high school, I had some more real relationships, but I felt pretty invisible walking the halls of my school. And while that was going on, my parents had just gotten divorced, and my mom was really in the throes of like a breakdown. So she was very depressed and not getting out of bed and very suicidal at times. And my dad was not there, and he kind of like walked out forever. And my sister was already away at that point in college. So I was very much struggling with so much that was too much for me to handle. And then going to high school felt like so surreal because I would be dealing with all of this horrendous stuff at home. Economically, we had nothing when my dad left. We moved into this little place. So it was like such a hard time emotionally, financially. And then I would have to go to high school and deal with all these things. And on top of it, I didn't feel good about my body image. I was super skinny. I had braces, and I had a broken nose. My sister and I had gotten into like a fight when I was like 12, and my nose had broken, but it had broken in such a way that I had this like huge bump from where the bone was sort of like broken. And it was like an Owen Wilson situation, except he's like a sexy guy, so it doesn't matter. So I wasn't able to get my nose fixed until I was in my senior year. So I used to walk around like covering my face. So I felt it was just not like I had no boobs. I was super skinny. I had braces. I had bangs. I had this awkward, weird, broken type nose. And my parents were not really able to be there. And then I would go to high school and like try to wear what I needed to wear and try to fit in while working 2 jobs. It was just like one of the hardest chapters of my life,
Yeah.
So it's an interesting question to start with.
Yeah. Did you have a lot of friends during that time?
Not like real friends, like I had some people who I would like talk to at school, but no one really was there as the person I would like talk to about all this stuff. Or, I had like, there was like a couple people who I was friends with actually who were older than me, who had already graduated. So yeah, it was a kind of a lonely time.
When you were doing theater too, I mean, did you actually perform? Do you like get any parts that were, on stage, that type of thing?
Yeah, when I was doing like, not in high school, not in the actual high school itself, but outside of high school, community theater. In the summers, I would go up to Boston, which was like a refuge for me, and did summer stock theater. And I was the lead in all of those shows, Into the Woods and Grease and I had no problems like amongst the kids who were super serious about theater. If I was doing community theater, regional theater, summer stock theater, I would always get a really good part.
Dealing with like a high school career that was like super maybe lonely, a little tough, and then dealing with like maybe insecurities about your physical appearance, that type of thing. How did you get over that fear when it was time to get on stage?
I felt like on stage was the place where I could shine because I have a really good voice. So I could sing, and I knew people. I also felt like all the theater kids were the ones who had all of our scars and bruises, and we weren't the ones who were super smooth and slick. So amongst them, I felt like I fit in, amongst a group of misfits, I guess. And I was getting really bad grades in high school. In fact, I didn't even know I was going to graduate.
Mm,
So the morning of graduation, I had to report to my homeroom while everybody else was just getting on their caps and gowns and meeting in the gymnasium. I was going to my homeroom teacher because I had been told 6 weeks before graduation that I wasn't going to graduate unless I could show proficiency. And the only way that they would let me like graduate is if I got an A on all these finals. And that seemed ridiculous. Like, how would I get an A on every final when I was barely showing up to class? So I studied for like the first time ever because I was desperate to get out of high school. And I showed up to my homeroom teacher's office that morning, like waiting to hear what the grades results were. And he said, I have good news and bad news. The bad news is you didn't make it. You got like a B plus. On one, you got an A. The other one, you got a C. On another one, you got a B plus. He's like, it's actually amazing that you did any of this right because you've missed so much school and your grades were so horrible. So you're able in 6 weeks you were able to grasp a whole bunch, but you did not get an A. Nowhere close on straight A's. So he said, that's the bad news. And I was like, well, that's pretty bad. And I was just crying, just crying in his office. He said, the good news is I'm going to lie. And the good news is I'm going to change all these grades
oh,
because
wow.
you have to get the hell out of here because you're not going to make it. Because
Yeah.
he knew that my mom was trying to commit suicide.
Oh,
That had happened like twice, and we had to call an ambulance. And he knew how bad it was. He knew my dad wasn't around for me, and he knew I had to get out of school.
mm-hmm.
So he lied for me, and I wound up being able to graduate that day. He said, go to the gym. There's going to be no diploma in what they hand you, but just go to the gym. And I'm going to lie. I mean, he put his job on the line.
Yeah.
So I graduated, and then I everything has been, everything worked out.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you still talk to him?
No, in fact, when I tell that story, I realize how much I owe him and how much I should, reach out to him. But right after that happened, I just was moving on with my life. I went to college
Mm-hmm.
literally like 3 days later because I hadn't applied to college. And so I drove up to the nearest college and said, I'd like to apply for school in the fall. And they said, are you joking? We just looked at your transcript. No way. So I got back in the car, drove to the next school, and they said, your grades are horrible, but if you start summer session, which is in 3 days, and you go on academic probation and you get straight A's, you can prove yourself to start in the fall. So I
Wow.
had to start immediately on academic probation and I had to get straight A's, and I did because I had to. So I worked really hard that summer.
Well,
Uh,
that's honestly incredible. It's funny what happens when you're like put in a jam, right? And you have to perform.
oh yeah. And so I did it. And then I wound up being a pretty big fish, in a pretty big pond. I went to Florida State. I grew up in Florida. So I went there. There's like 40,000 kids on campus, but I got really involved in school and I became editor of my college paper. And I was like president inside student government. And I took it on big time. And I graduated with honors, and my professors threw me a graduation dinner. And I mean, it was just such a different story. And yeah, I found a lot of myself in school.
That's amazing. So you've obviously built a great career for yourself, but did you envision yourself like creating online courses, or I don't know when you went to college and if that was even a thing at that time, but like,
No way. Oh my God, no way.
what did
And
you
if
want to do?
So at that time, I had no idea. So I wound up studying, trying to find meaning in life because life was so devoid of meaning, in a place where your mother is suicidal, your dad left. Before that, he was an alcoholic. Before that, you saw your parents, being violent with each other. My life just felt really hard. So I was looking for meaning wherever I could find it. So I asked, in the dean's office, like what major I could major in order to be surrounded and looking at that question, like, why are we here? And she said, why don't you become a humanities, like interdisciplinary major so you can study philosophy, religion, sociology, and anthropology? And I'm like, well, what would that be? And she's like, that would be looking at humans, why we do what we do, religious ideas, anthropological ideas. Like you'll get to look at why people think the way they think and act the way they act, and what are some of the ideas and the wisdom that people have held on to. And I was like, yes. So I, of course, got straight A's because I was reading books on Buddhism. I was reading books on indigenous people. I was reading books on the sociological impact of parenting. So I was like obsessed. I was like, oh my God, people have talked about this before. People understand hardship, pain. People have asked big questions like, why am I on the planet? And these are the answers that Hindus have. These are the answers that Christians have. These are the answers that Jews have. And I was like, this is amazing. It was amazing. And I was writing all these papers about what everybody had in common. And I was like, it is all the same. They're all looking for belonging, something that's bigger than themselves. They're all looking to contribute to the world. They're all looking for purpose. I was like, wow, human beings are amazing. And my final paper, I wrote about the similarities between Moses and the Buddha, who were both they both were raised in a palace and then went into an ascetic position and then came back to save people. I was like, has anyone stopped to see that these two stories are identical? It's amazing, and so you look around and you get it and you realize this is what we need. This is what makes us tick. We need to know we're connected to something bigger. We need a sense of purpose. We need to belong. And you realize, well, if every single human that's ever lived, including all the indigenous tribal people, including the Yanomamos who they found in Brazil, deep in the Amazon, all of us have always had this idea that there's something after this world. Isn't that a trip? Every person, whether they ever met or spoke the same language, they all believed in some form of heaven. They all believe in some form of sort of like a reincarnation or some kind of purification of our soul. That's insane. And you step back and you go, maybe there's something to that. That right. Every person knew that intuitively and expressed it in their own languages. It's just awesome. So that gave me life. That totally turned me around. And then the question that you asked is, so what did you want to do with your life? Well, that was pretty confusing because my friends who liked political science were now going to law school. And my friends who liked English were thinking about being, I don't know, history professors, or they were going to look into writing novels or journalism. I was like, I like meaning and purpose. What am I going to do? I don't know, I wasn't sure. And then I loved writing music. So I thought maybe I'll write these ideas. I will share these ideas in songs. I didn't know. It was just it was a long road without a compass, without a map. I was just kind of trying stuff and it led me here.
So a lot of what your content and your, checked out your website and a lot of your podcasts are based around is helping other people find their purpose, right? How did you find yours? Because it's it was obviously super confusing. You had all these interests, music and anthropology, all these things. How did you finally hone in on yours?
Well, I'm going to answer you, but I'm also going to say something to you about your purpose, because I do so many interviews and I get exhausted sometimes because I get asked the same questions. This is my favorite interview that I've ever done.
Yes.
You are so gifted at knowing what really matters. And I'm so impressed with you right now. And if you listen to me on other podcasts, I don't always stop and say that. And I just feel so good. This conversation is one of the funnest. I'm when you said before we hit record, I'm going to start by asking you about high school. I was like, why on earth would we talk about high school? No one asked me that. And of course, now we're really getting to the root of who the heck I am. And no one asked me about what I studied in college or what I wanted to do. It's just so fun. So thank you for that. How did I find my purpose is, I think that just, people think you discover it under a rock. It's like, I found it. Here it is. It was in the kitchen, underneath the sofa. I don't think it's like that. I think it's a develop, it's like when you go into a dark room and you have a negative and you slowly turn it into a photograph slowly. I think that we are always innately here for the same reason, right? Like if you go back and you peel it back, I think that the people who knew us as we were little kids would be like, yeah, you always kind of wanted to cheer people up, or you were always funny, or you always were a problem solver, right? There's certain things that are essential to who we are, but the how it's going to play out, I think that what that's going to look like is something that develops over time. And so I just kept following the whisper of like, what might this look like? And I would follow, here's what's interesting. I would follow the enthusiasm. And what we know now is that enthusiasm lights up in the brain more than anything else, more than love. So when you feel enthusiastic about doing something, you should trust it. You should do it, because that's where all the juice is. And then even if it fails, quote unquote, you will learn whatever you needed. You'll get the next clue because there was something there that you had to make, or you had to do, or you had to say, and then it will lead you to the next thing. And so I've always kind of trusted that, because I've been completely on my own for a long time. Like since I was like 4, I remember knowing my parents are not really able to help me. They're really engrossed in their dysfunction and all of this stuff. And I know they love me, but they're more like my kids or my siblings than they are my parents. So I have to do this on my own. So I became very self-reliant and very resourceful. And they weren't criticizing my work. They weren't even asking me if I got a report card. There was no checking in. So it was kind of like, what did I care? I'll just figure it out. So there was a lot of that permission I gave myself to try things and be messy.
Before you started the online courses and public speaking, things like that, what was your profession? What did you do for money before that?
Well, what wound up happening, long story short, is that I moved to Los Angeles. I had never been here, sight unseen. I just moved across the country. I really wanted to get as far away from home as possible. So LA was the other side of the country, literally. And I loved music. So I thought, I'll go there and somehow I'll figure it out. I'll get a record deal. Well, what wound up happening was, it turns out they don't just give those out. And my songs were really mediocre, right? There's also that. I wrote and wrote and wrote. I got a day job. I went on Craigslist, found a job. I found an apartment, got a roommate. And while I was working and grinding, I also was writing songs. And they wound up getting a little bit better every time. And then you know what happened? I got a record deal. And I was signed to Interscope. And it was like this big moment. But I was like, when are they going to realize I'm not this good? You know what I mean? Like I knew that it would drop. I was actually sitting watching them record Paparazzi with Lady Gaga. They were recording a version for the VMAs. And I was in the studio that night because I had just gotten signed to Interscope. It was very surreal. Anyway, I wound up getting dropped from the label, which wasn't a surprise because I had gotten better. And I told you I had a good voice. So I had a good voice. I'd gotten into a place where I wrote better songs, but I kind of knew that the reason they signed me is because I'm really good in a meeting. Like I know how to connect with people. So look, she has a good voice. The songs are pretty good. We really like her. Let's work with her. You know what I'm saying? But it wasn't like this. I knew that maybe they would let me go. They let me go. I got a bunch of day jobs. I was pretty sad. I was so close. I didn't know what I would do next. I think a lot of times with our careers, we think it's either Beyonce or bust. It's all or nothing. So I thought, oh, there's no way to do music now. So I did a bunch of things. I worked at a nonprofit. I worked for this guy in commercial real estate. I did all these things until I couldn't take it anymore. And I asked a new question. And the new question was, is there any other way to do music? Like besides being a rock star, because I do have a good voice. So I started looking into that and researching that. And the answer to that question was, there were people licensing songs of theirs to Grey's Anatomy. There were people licensing their songs to Old Navy commercials and Coca-Cola commercials. And I had never thought that thought in my life. And I thought, well, I have good songs. Let me reach out to ad agencies completely cold. And I was nervous and my hands would shake. Let me reach out to NBC and try to get someone on the phone who chooses the music. Oh, that person's called a music supervisor. Okay, now I know that. Let me write down all the different music supervisors I can find online and see if I can somehow get to them and ask them questions and write music for them. And I did that. And so sitting behind me in my office are like, there's a Billboard article, a Variety article, a Music Connection article.
Oh, wow.
And there were literally full pages. You know, sometimes people are like, I was mentioned. And it's like, no, people wrote these full page stories about me with pictures. They put me on the cover, you know, because I wound up, as they say in the articles, Cathy Heller writes her own check. Cathy Heller, the ultimate DIY artist. What I wound up doing was, without a label, without an agent, without a publisher, without a manager, I wrote songs and got those songs in the hands of the people choosing music for film, TV, and advertising. And I made my own relationships, and I looked over my own contracts, and I asked questions, and I wrote songs, and I built a business. And so I wound up, from the age of like 27, starting to make about 300 grand a year, because I would have songs in Target, Walmart, Criminal Minds, Switched at Birth, Pretty Little Liars, The Office, NBC promos, American Airlines, Champion Sportswear, Kodak. Like, I just got music. And then what happened was the online courses, because when I was featured in these magazines, I thought, oh my God, I'll get a record deal. They'll be so sorry they dropped me, because they'll be like, this woman's a cash cow. She writes all these great songs. We could have licensed her music. Obviously, if these shows like her songs, we could have that didn't happen. That didn't happen. Instead, other artists saw these articles and started sending me emails, and they would send me DMs saying things like, that's so cool that you can do that. Do you know how I could do that? Can you help me do that? And at first I would just like say, no, I really didn't know. I had never taught. So it wasn't like I knew what my process was. I had never stepped back and be like, what do I do first? What do I do second? What do I do third? Until finally, my husband's best friend was over one night, and he goes, you are missing the biggest opportunity. Do you know how many people want to know how to do this? If you're making $300,000 a year doing it, you could make $900,000 a year teaching other people how to do it. I was like, he's insane. He's lost his mind. And I felt insulted. I felt like he was telling me that I wasn't a good enough artist, that I should go teach it. You know, this idea, those who can't do teach. Yeah. I was like, I'm not a teacher. I'm an artist. I'm not a teacher. So I pushed it off for 2 years straight. Can you help me? No. Can you help me? Like, all day long, people ask me, and I was like, I don't even know what they're talking about. I'm an artist. I couldn't even see what that would look like or whatever. And then finally, it just hit me. Why am I so fragile with my ego? Like, why don't I teach other artists? What would be the harm in that? So I said, I'm going to do it. And so I started the simplest way. I had a living room. I told 10 people they could come over. Immediately they were like, I'm in, right? I told 10 songwriters they could come, and they loved it. We met for 3 hours, and they were like, I would pay for this. Can we meet 3 more times, 5 more times? So we did, until my living room was full. There were now 24 people in my living room. It was like ridiculous. So then I was like, all right, I'm going to try to rent some kind of space, like a rec room or a theater. I'm going to find. So I did that. And then there was a girl who reached out to me and said, I live in San Luis Obispo, which is 4 hours from here. She said, one of my friends lives down in LA, and I can't come to you, and I really want to know how to license my music. And my friend said that you are on fire and everything you're teaching is gold. Could you teach it online? And I'm like, no, I don't know what that means. I didn't have an Instagram. I didn't have a list. I didn't have a podcast. I didn't know Amy Porterfield. I knew nothing. So she said, well, you should try, because you would be so successful at it. And people like me would be really happy if you could try to do that. I literally thought she was speaking Japanese. I swear to God, my heart was racing when she was talking, because she was like, oh, all you would have to do is run a Facebook ad, let songwriters know where you're at, then put something up on like a Teachable, or she's like talking to me. She goes, because I've taken this kind of class and da-da-da. And then you could do this, and then you could create some kind of opt-in, and then that. And I was like, I told her, I said, as you're talking, I feel like I need a dictionary. I don't know what you're talking about. So I get off the phone with her. My heart is racing. And I'm like, she's so sure of what she's saying. I don't know what she's talking about, but maybe I should try to do it. I remember the first 3 times sitting down, a total novice, trying to create an opt-in, trying to even think, where on earth would these songwriters come from? And I was like totally scared, overwhelmed. I shut the computer, forget it. Finally, 2 weeks later, I decide I'm just going to do it. I was pregnant. And I said, I have 3 months till this baby's born. Maybe I should just do this. And I did it. And my very first webinar, I had no slides, none, not one slide, nothing. It was just me talking to a camera with a big pregnant belly. And I said, this is who I am. This is what I did. And these are a few things that you can do. And at the end, I said, I've never done this before, but I'm willing to offer a class. And here's what it is. And 147 people signed up on the spot.
Wow.
And I was like, huh. So I made $147,000 that day. And I was like, wow,
Holy.
that's the fastest money I've ever made. And then the class was good. And then I launched it again. And the second time we launched, we made 442. The third time we launched, we made $1 million.
Wow.
And I launched it twice a year. And I went from being a songwriter to being a songwriter who helped other songwriters. And lo and behold, my songwriting career grew because I started bringing in the music supervisors from Fox, Lionsgate, NBC, trailer companies to speak over Zoom in my class. And they said, you know, Cathy, you're so good at talking to people. I love being in your class. You gave me such a sense of purpose. Plus I would pay them $300 to come on for an hour, which is not nothing for them. They don't get asked to do that all the time. They sit at a desk. They don't get asked to speak on, panels every day. They do sometimes, and they enjoyed it. And then they would say to me, I loved hanging out with you. Do you have music? I need something for, my career grew. So I was like, wait a minute, this is so weird. I'm helping other artists, but my own career is growing. And then the other artists started getting licenses. We had this guy, John, took my class. He's like, I just made $54,000 for my song in a Starbucks ad.
Wow.
Do you know that you've single-handedly completely changed my life? Then this girl, Christy, says to me, my song's on Grey's Anatomy, Kath. I just made $11,000 and all of my friends and family think I'm the coolest person because they heard me in Grey's Anatomy. Who the hell are you? So then I didn't have to do any selling because we would have so many results. Now, then what happened was one of my songwriter students said to me, you should start a podcast. I said, a podcast? What's a podcast? This is 3 years ago.
Yeah.
She said, because so much of what you talk about is not about songwriting. It's about being resourceful, sending the right emails, being personable, understanding your clients' needs, asking them what they need, not telling them what you have. And this applies to anyone. So 3 years ago, I started a podcast. Now I have the baby, my music career, the online class, and I start the podcast. And I'm like, let's just do this. You may as well. I'm super busy. I'm never going to be less busy. And the podcast just took off. And then I started an Instagram. I was like, I guess I should have a community, to catch up with myself. Yeah. I started this and like you said, we're almost at 12 million downloads and it's been 3 years. We started January 2017.
That's amazing. So a lot of people, especially the listener right now too, are maybe wondering like, what should I do? A lot of times they kind of have at least an idea of what they want to do, whether it's helping people with mental health, if it's in fitness or anything like that. But I think the number one thing that they struggle with is what should they do first now that they know what they want to do? So from your lens and from your experience, what should that first thing be for the aspiring entrepreneur?
Okay, the very, very first thing that we forget that every company, every business, every human has ever done is validate if it's the proof of concept, validate the offer, validate it. Is this something that people want? People forget that there's a difference between a hobby and a business. A hobby means like, I love to paint. I love to take pictures. I love to songwrite. That's awesome. It doesn't matter what other people think. That's a hobby. Enjoy it. If it's a business, by definition, it means someone else paid me, right? That's the difference, which means somebody else needs or wants what I make. That's a business. So the first thing I need to do is think, who might want these cupcakes? Who might need this help with their mental, like you said, mental health stuff? Who might be the person who wants to come over as a songwriter to learn what I'm doing? Who might want to buy this mug? Who might want to take this watercolor workshop? Think of one person. My friend Sandy likes watercolor. My friend Jamie, she's a vegan. She might like these vegan cupcakes I make. My friend Chelsea, she's a songwriter. Maybe she should come over. One person, and you share with them. Here's what I'm making. Do you need it? Do you want it? Have you ever tried anything like this before? What did you like about what you tried? What did you not like about it? And what do you like about this or what do you don't like about it? Oh my God. Now you're working. Now you get some data. Kath, I do like it, but I need you to answer more questions for me. I'm a songwriter and you said you're going to make this workshop, but you're not telling me this part. Oh, interesting. That's what you want? Be right back. I do like these vegan cupcakes, but I have to tell you the texture is a little weird. Can you make them gluten-free? Can you make, oh, interesting. That's what you're saying. Yeah, I'll be right back. Or I do like watercolor and exactly what you just said. Yeah, I've been looking for exactly that. Cool. Thank you so much. Validation, right?
Sure.
So we are constantly on a quest to validate, tweak, validate more. So every single person, whether they're making peanut butter at Skippy or whether they're making Apple products, what are they doing constantly? They're trying to know you better. They're trying to understand you. They're holding focus groups. That's what business is. So it's about going to a person, figuring that out, and then you can take it to the next place.
Can you give some advice on maybe who they should ask? And the reason I ask you that is because I feel as if maybe some people are asking people that are close to them that don't want to tell them no, right? So how do you go about finding like a trusted person that will give you like real feedback on the viability of your business or your idea?
Well, what I would do is actually put a little distance between yourself and the person in the conversation to make it easier for them to answer.
Mm-hmm.
So what I might do is create it's literally free, a Google form where I would ask those questions. And those are really the go-to questions like, do you like this? Do you not like it? Have you tried anything like it before? If you have, what did you like or not like about that thing, right? And so if you have a Google form, I would send it to 3 to 5 people and say, you can fill this out anonymously. I won't know who you are that's filling it out because they don't have to put their name and their email address. They can just answer it. And you can let them know I'm sending this to 5 people. It's an anonymous poll. I'd love to hear your feedback. It might help them be honest with you. Part of the reason you want to ask the question, have you tried anything like this? Is because if they say no, then their feedback is not really so interesting. Because if they say no, I've never tried vegan food, I don't know that you want their opinion on your vegan food. Like, why would you care? You know what I mean? Like, I'm not a vegan. My best friend makes vegan food and I don't really like vegan food. So I don't like any of it. Yeah. I wish I did. I know it's the nicer way to be on the planet, but the point is you want to know if they've tried this thing. That helps you validate if they're even the right person. But I do think a blind Google form helps with that. Mm-hmm. Because the truth is when you begin, you only have your network. And I wouldn't want people to dismiss their existing network because I do think that 3 to 5 people in your existing network might become your first clients, might become your first people you do organizing for, might become the first people you teach piano lessons to, might become the first people you cater their parties. So I don't think it's a bad thing. I just think you need a little bit of scrutiny around how to get the like real raw answers.
Yeah, I love that. Now, you mentioned in that, like, you know, you don't want to necessarily ask somebody that's never tried a vegan cookie before or whatever it might be. So once I have the idea, once I have some of the viability, how do I take it to the next step and find out who I'm meant to serve? Because I think a lot of people just starting out, they'll be like, well, everybody's going to like my vegan cookie. I can convert anybody to do at-home yoga or whatever it is. But in my experience and what I believe to be true is that, you know, the common phrase, the riches are in the niches, right? And I think that that's really what people should go for. So what are some, you know, tips you can give on like finding exactly who somebody should be targeting?
Yeah. So what I love to think about is how to let them find you. And they will find you sort of like thinking if you're at Disneyland and you're with a group and you want to be able to find your group leader will hold up like a flag and you'll know to look for it above all the, you know, above the crowd, and you'll know, oh, that's where I'm meeting. That's where I see that flag. That's my group. You have to raise the flag so people go, oh, there she is, right? So people can find you. How you do that is through marketing. Now, what does that mean? Marketing, this is what I love. Marketing literally means communication. That's it. So marketing means I am clearly communicating who I am, what I do to the people I do it for. Okay. So what does that mean? It's not about how fast and how big your audience is. It's about how deep the engagement is. So I would say start to talk about what you do, why you do what you do, and start to build awareness consistently. You know, if you're consistent and you show up, people start to go, oh, she takes this really seriously. I'm starting to have some trust around knowing that this is who she is and this is what she likes and this is what she does. And the way that we learn things as kids is through repetition. So if you want to learn the alphabet, you got to repeat it. Why is it that everybody knows that Al Gore cares about the environment? Because we've heard that 1,000 times. And literally, like, it was not during his campaign, that was all we heard. And he wanted to make that clear. It's good. It's a good thing, right? Whatever the slogan is, right? What is Coca-Cola? It's like happiness, happiness, happiness. Like they say it in a million ways. Open the happiness, shake up the happiness. This is happiness. So when you buy a Coke, you're like, I don't know why I feel happy all of a sudden. They freaking created Santa Claus. They are all about happiness. So they're not selling Coke. They're selling happy feelings. That's what they're selling. Pharrell, they're selling the music. They're selling those vibes. They're selling people getting engaged, people jumping out of airplanes. They're selling happy vibes. That needed to be repeated over and over and over and over and over again. It cannot stop. It cannot stop, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you think about brands, it's constant. So what we do is we start to show up consistently and we talk about what we do. Now, you're going to say, but nobody's listening. I just started a podcast. I just started an Instagram. I don't know anybody. That's not true. You might get 3 people, 9 people. What you then do is you engage with those people. You don't just post things. You don't talk at people. You ask a question, and an easy question to answer. You post something and then you say, tell me in an emoji how this made you feel. That's so easy and fun to answer. Then when people answer, you write back to them and say, I just went to your feed and I love that you have that cat, that blah, blah, blah. That's hilarious. And you connect deep, deep. Then you say, I love that you shared that. I'm going to DM you, check your DMs. Then you go to that. Now you could do this in a measurable way. You could say every day, I'm going to reach out to 10 people on Instagram. That's it. 10. Mm-hmm. I'm going to connect, comment on what they're doing, maybe DM them. It starts to grow. Every single thing in the world is word of mouth. Everything. A good example is a movie studio could spend $1 gajillion on advertising. The second one person tells you the movie is awful, you're not going. You'd be like, oh, they ruined it. Like there were certain Star Wars recently where people were like, don't go, you'll hate it. And people didn't go. It didn't matter how much they were spending on it, right?
Yeah.
So it's all word of mouth. It's the same thing with a tiny network. It's actually easier in the beginning because if you really go deep with 3 people every single day, every person on average has about 400 Facebook friends, which means every person is connected to other people. So if you would get those people interested and excited, and then you would say, I love that you love my workshop or my class or my cookie or my content, or it would mean the world to me if you shared it. Actually, if you share it, which you don't have to, I'll send you something because it really means so much to me. Send them a Starbucks gift card, send them a t-shirt. It's so sweet. Right? And then you don't have to sell anything because other people are saying, I loved this thing. And if you like it, you would love her too.
That's an interesting point that you bring up because I loved one of the quotes that you posted recently that says, you either have the courage to sell or you work for someone else who has the courage to.
Yes. I'm obsessed with that quote. My friend Susie Moore said that to me offhandedly the other day, just in a conversation. I went, what did you just say? Those were exactly the words. I was like, I wish I would have said that myself.
Yeah. So how does somebody get over that fear of like asking for the first sale or asking for the first share, whatever it might be? Like asking for for me, I hate it. Like to this day, I hate selling people, which is weird because I'm like in charge of business development at my company,
Sure.
right? So how do you get over that fear? Or how might somebody else?
Oh my God, I'm going to turn that around for you so fast. I'm so glad you asked that. Here's the deal. Do you know who Daniel Pink is?
I don't.
Okay. Daniel Pink is one of the most famous speakers, teachers. He has his TED Talk is in the top 10 most watched TED Talks. He's a genius. And when he was on my show, I said to him, what do you do when you feel salesy and dumb about selling something? And he said, Cathy, if you do something that's going to make a difference in someone's life, I don't care if it's a piece of software. I don't care if it's going to save someone time. I don't care if it's a beautiful piece of art that makes somebody feel a certain way. It's not, should I do this thing? It's your moral obligation to put that thing in the world. Okay, so let's unpack it for a second. To sell is to serve. The way that you don't feel guilty is when you do what I just said before every day and you're asking people, what do you need? Have you tried this? Is it working? Is it not? What would you want different about this? When you keep starting with what the person wants, at the core, what it should be is radical empathy. So when you have it in hand and you then invite the person to come collect what it is that you made on their behalf, you should feel like, I'm so glad I have the thing you want. Let me tell you a story that happened to me. Literally, it was like 5 weeks ago. 5 weeks ago, driving my car, my 3 kids are in the back seat. It's a Sunday. We were on our way to the Grove, which is this like cute little outdoor shopping area. And my light comes on and says emergency oil failure, like something bad. I had never seen this light. And I look it up I actually type in my phone, what does it mean when your car says this and it says bad, like you need an oil change, like it's bad, it can lead to engine failure. So I'm like, oh crap. And it's a new car, but I just had been putting off getting an oil change, and it's a 2-year-old car. And I realized I had never gotten one. I was like, oh, that's not good. So on a Sunday, and I start to hear my car making these weird noises, and my 3 kids are in the car, and it's a Sunday, and I start to sweat because I'm literally scared. And then I start to like smell a little smoky smell.
No.
And I'm like, this is an expensive car and I'm about to destroy it. It's also leased. I like leased my BMW, right? So I'm like, I'm going to screw up my $84,000 X7 BMW that I'm going to have to give back, or my kids are going to, God forbid, go up and smoke. What's going to happen right now? Like none of it's good. Like none of it's going to be good. At that moment, I was desperate for there to be some kind of like drive-through or any kind of oil change place open. Go to my Google Maps, drive to the closest one. They're closed. It's a Sunday. Go to another one. Closed. It's a Sunday. Then I'm Googling, right? And I see the third one says open 7 days a week. And I drive to it. I drove in there. The guy comes out. He's like, well, I think it was called like Valvoline or something. I don't know. He goes, welcome to Valvoline. Just pull right through, blah, blah, blah. He gives my kids coloring books. They have these like cute cars, pictures. My kids are coloring in the back seat. They're interested in what he's doing. He comes over to tell me the price. I didn't care at that moment if it was $16,000. I was so grateful that I go, is anything wrong with my engine? He goes, no, but it's so not great. The color of that oil is so gross. Like it's a really good thing you came in, but no, it's fine. I said, what's it cost? He's like $104. We'll put in the best oil. I go, all of it, give it to me. I don't care what, $104. I was like, I'll take anything. Offer me anything, throw it in. I was ready to pay 16 times what he asked me. That's because I really needed it. Right? If you found somebody's wallet outside your house, you wouldn't hesitate to call and say, I found your wallet. So if you're feeling bad about selling, then you're not clear that this person is going to be lifted by this. This person needs this. And if you're not clear about that, go back and look at what it is, or go back and connect with the end buyer, the person who is, and find out how can you make that experience the best. Or how can you just look at the people who've enjoyed it and been like, I am going to put out this vegan food because there are probably people who want other options who are eating vegan. Or I am going to make this podcast because for the 4 people who said it made a difference, I'm going to self-promote it because it is making a difference. And how could I not do that if I know it's going to help somebody else?
Right. So everything that you've done so far, I mean, you've accomplished some incredible things. Like the stories that you're telling me about your music career is fantastic, especially as a failed aspiring rock star at one point for me. I love
Cheers.
that. Cheers, right? But, I believe that accomplishing what you've accomplished, even going as far back as when you had to show competency in high school, right, takes an extreme amount of focus. And you had so many distractions with your father, your mother. It sounds as if your sister was kind of like, had the spotlight. How do you limit those? How do you limit those distractions? And then when you were starting your online course, you were pregnant, you're married, like all of these things.
Yeah.
Like, how do you limit all those distractions? And what are some of those steps that you had to take to put yourself in a space to where you could focus on those things?
Yeah, I mean, I think we all have that stuff. And I feel like in some ways, the blessing of going through hard stuff is that you don't expect things to not be hard. And I think what I learned is that I would get resourceful and I could do something hard. I could be uncomfortable and do something, but it would lead somewhere good. And the more you have experienced doing that, you just put yourself in uncomfortable situations. And so I would know I was uncomfortable or I didn't feel ready. That first podcast episode I recorded, I re-recorded it 8 times. I hated it. And I was like, you know what? I'm not doing this to myself. I'm too
Mhm.
self-conscious about what I'm saying. I don't feel like any of what I'm saying is really good enough, and I'm not going to do it. And then a few days later, I realized, or what if I did it knowing that it was mediocre? Because it's not amazing, your first episode. But what if I gave myself a little grace to just be uncomfortable and do it anyway? Maybe it would be worth it. So I decided I'm never going to re record episodes. I'm just going to do them, put them out, do them and put them out. And creativity, just like anything, it's a numbers game because there's an average, right? So that means 50% of what anything is below average. That's what average means. That means 50% of all plays somebody writes are below average. That means 50% of the songs a songwriter writes are below average. That's just literally what average means, even for the best. So I realize so much of what happens to us is like, it better be perfect. It better be as good as this thing. That we're already uncomfortable. We're already struggling with, like you said, this person's issues in our family, or somebody's sick, or we don't have enough time. If we could give ourselves permission to be average, I'm telling you what, the brilliant stuff slips through. You wind up getting a lot more courageous than you think. And it starts to build, that muscle starts to build. And then you're like, I do hard things. Okay. They're all hard.
Mhm.
Like there's no way around it. And you get familiar with that and you're able to do it uncomfortable. So I'm uncomfortable all the time.
I love that.
I
everything that
am.
everything that you're saying right now. I mean, you mentioned that you felt like this is a great conversation. It's only because like everything, I'm like, please teach me the ways. This is, so you have a book that came out in November, last November, right? And it's called "Don't Keep Your
Yes,
Day Job."
this is it.
Yeah, I love that cover. By the way, it's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's really cool. What can somebody expect to find in that book?
This book helps you start to come home to yourself. This book helps you find what are those little whispers that have been there all along? What's essential that you bring to the world? What's essential that lights you up? And then once you're looking at that in a new way and giving it more respect than maybe you have for a while, because maybe you've been pushing it off, then it gives you sort of tools to make a living doing that. And it also shows you all of these examples, not only how, but of what it can become. And I think when we see these other possibilities, we reach forward. I think sometimes we don't reach because we just don't see it. Like before I knew that artists were licensing music to film and TV, I didn't know that there was another path. Once I saw that path, I was like, I'm going to head down that path. And so it was really helpful to me that journalists were talking about it because it showed me a new branch to reach for. So the
Mhm.
book shows you so many ways that you can monetize what you love. We even have like broken it into different archetypes. Like let's say you love pottery. It's like, well, you could make pottery, right? So one way is to be the maker. Then we say another archetype is to be a teacher. You could teach people how to do pottery. Third way would be you could curate, right? You could be like, I just have really good taste. I want to create an online shop of all different pieces of pottery from all around the world. Or I'm going to create a gallery opening with all this pottery, or only pieces that are dark colors, or only pieces that are made of this kind of clay. Like you could curate. The last one is investigator. Some people are right now in our world, they don't make the thing, they don't teach the thing, they don't curate the thing, but they just want to talk about the thing. They want to create a blog around pottery, a podcast around pottery, a summit where they're going to interview people talking about it or it's amazing. So I think by the time you're finished reading the book, you're like, I've always loved dance. I didn't know how I could do anything with it because I'm not a good enough dancer, or I don't feel like I'm wanting to be on my feet all day long, but I really could teach, or I really could create a whole world around people who have been dancers and interview them and talk. It's like, yeah, wait a minute. There's so many ways for me to be immersed in what I love and what lights me up, because what the world needs is more people who are lit up. So the
Mhm.
book walks you through a lot of how, a lot of what, and a lot of where it can go. And I think that makes people feel really excited. There's journal prompts at the end of every chapter. So I think it's been lighting a fire inside of people, which is really cool.
That's incredible. And you have a podcast that's around similar subjects as well as a
Yeah.
course as well, right?
Yeah, my podcast is also called Don't Keep Your Day Job. And we've interviewed people like Jenna Fisher from The Office who played Pam. And we've interviewed Howard Schultz who created Starbucks, which that's amazing because he started out in public housing. He was very, very poor growing up. So that's an amazing tale. We've interviewed a lot of awesome people. And then I have created courses. I have a program called Made to Do This, which helps people figure out what they were made to do and then how to build it into a business and validate it. And now I'm sort of, especially with what's going on with coronavirus, I'm thinking about being even more specific and helping people create online businesses, whether it's podcasting, creating programs that actually work, building an audience online. All those things have really changed my life so much that I'm thinking, how do I get even more specific and help people do that? Because I think everyone now is asking themselves that question. Can I build a business online? Because that's all I have. That's the only freeway we have right now is the social freeway. So it's like helping people navigate that might be something I just feel I have to do. And I might launch that very soon.
I love that. Cathy, I mean, your story is absolutely incredible. And
That's so sweet.
yeah, I mean that. And I love listening to you because there's so many similarities. Honestly, there's a lot of similarities between you and I. Like, I had a teacher as well who said, like, you're not going to pass this class unless you ace the final, and otherwise don't show up for the final if you're not going to ace it.
Wow, that's so similar.
Yeah. And then I studied really hard and I didn't answer the last two questions because I knew I got everything else right. This was Mr. Kaplan. If you're listening, this is for you. And I didn't answer the last two. And then because I knew I got everything else right, ended up acing it. And then I also wanted
you did.
Yeah, I also wanted to play music growing up, and things went a different way. I played in a lot of bands, opened for Warrant, like who
What?
else? Yeah, man, it's crazy. So there's a
Open
lot
for Warrant.
for Warrant. Yeah, it was pretty amazing.
That is amazing, and I used to sing those songs. Oh my god.
Yeah, so there's a lot there, and then obviously we're doing a lot in marketing and helping to teach other people. So I appreciate you being so open about your entire story, and we only scratched the surface of what it is in our time today. But before I ask the last question of the day, if somebody wants to know more about you, if they want to read the book, the course, where can they find you?
You can find me on Instagram at Cathy.Heller. Cathy's with a C. You can find the podcast, Don't Keep Your Day Job, wherever you listen to podcasts. And then on my website, CathyHeller.com, there's a lot of resources there, including a free quiz, which is is designed to help you figure out which passion project might be really designed for you in this life. Like, what is your purpose? Which archetype? And then it gives you a lot of resources and it's all free. So those are the ways.
I love that. And to the listener too, I would recommending at the very least following Cathy's Instagram, because there aren't a lot of entrepreneurs or motivational people or inspirational people I follow. I don't follow like Tom Bilyeu. I've muted Gary Vaynerchuk, all these people, because the difference is Cathy is insanely raw. She talks about the things that nobody wants to talk about on her Instagram, and it gives you a better feeling of what that is. I'm a big fan of what you do.
Thank you.
100%. And before we wrap up the podcast today, the last question is, what was the favorite role that you played in one of your plays and why?
Oh my God. You are so sweet and awesome. You made me feel like 29 feet tall. My favorite role was Little Red in Into the Woods. And it's because she is a unrelenting optimist. Her grandmother gets eaten. This wolf turns out to be a horrible person, a creature that she can't trust. Mm-hmm. And yet she continues to walk through this dark wooded place, and all the other characters are kind of falling apart. And she's like, we can do this. Like, let's keep going. And so I felt very much like her. And interestingly enough, during rehearsals, in the wings, the guy who played the wolf actually stepped on my hand. And I came out for my song in dress rehearsal, and my hand, I passed out because my hand actually was broken. I broke this thumb right here. And so I went to the hospital and they gave me a red cast. And I went back the next day to do opening night with my red cast. And it really didn't slow me down. And I remember thinking no matter what, that's kind of my thing. We got it, like Poppy from the Trolls. We're doing it anyway. I think I've always kind of wanted to be that person and played that person in every way, even when I felt like I couldn't. So I just love that character, and Sondheim music is amazing. So that was a really fun part to play.
I love that. Thank you for sharing, Cathy. To the listener, thank you so much for your time and attention. We really appreciate it. If you loved the episode, we would dig a 5-star review. And if you didn't like it that much, feel free to stick it to us, but subscribe anyway, because there's going to be a ton of incredible people just like Cathy back on the show. Thanks again, Cathy.
Thank you so much.